It's Karl with a K. Let's talk about Hollywood. Welcome to the show. Hi everyone, this is Karl Gibson. Welcome to Let's Talk About Hollywood. It's been a while, I know. How have you been? I hope everyone has been doing great. Things have been fine here. Been some things that have been part of why I've been away for about a month, but I will tell you all about it. So this is just a check-in episode. So not just, but a check-in episode. I'm checking in with you. I hope that you're doing well. It's important to me. And thank you for all of you who have been listening in the month that I've been away. And I'll thank you right now. Thank you to the United States. Thank you to Japan. Japan, let me just tell you all, Japan was one of the first countries that downloaded and listened to this podcast, along with the United States, of course, which has always been my primary market, of course, because this podcast is recorded and comes from the United States. And so that was early on. The podcast turns 10 months old. Let's Talk About Hollywood turns 10 months old in 3 days, this Sunday, July 26th. So Japan was on board, and then there weren't really any listeners, which was fine, meaning, this podcast has reached 32 countries. And so sometimes countries listen, and then sometimes they don't. And so I hadn't seen Japan for a long time. And in the last month, I guess Japan started catching up because I can see the analytics. Okay, so I can see the countries. That's all I can see specifically. Like I said, this isn't, GPS analytics here. It just tells you the country and it tells you the amount of downloads. And so Japan really has been keeping the downloads going in the month that I've been gone. So I just want to say, of course, to everyone who's been listening, thank you. But especially to Japan, just because I hadn't seen Japan. Japan had been away for some months. And so welcome back. Also, Spain. Can't leave out Spain. Spain, congratulations on the World Cup. All right, y'all. All right. And thank you to Thailand, Italy, Canada, Germany, China, Brazil, France, the United Kingdom, India, La Réunion, and Australia. So Australia, thank you. Thank you, all of you. All of those countries, all of you people who have taken the time to make me a part of your day or your evening and to just listen and get to know me. And I really appreciate it, as I always say. And for those of us, which are many, who are dealing right now with freakish weather events and heat, including Japan, the UK, Brazil, France, I could go on and on. As I've said to you before, not minimizing it at all. I have been in 106 degrees plus with no air conditioning, here in the States, depending on where you are, what city you are, there's lots of infrastructure that doesn't have central air. And sometimes where you live isn't amenable to window units that you can just stick up in there. And even if so, it's very expensive. It's hard on your electric bill. And so for everyone going through heat waves right now, I'm thinking of you. Please take care of yourself. Make sure to hydrate, to rest. Check on your seniors and your young people. Be careful with your pets, of course, in the car. And I am thinking of you. So I wanted to say that. And I'll just get it out of the way now since we're just starting. This podcast runs on donations. It is a donation optional model. And I know that only 5% of podcasts that operate on a donation only model actually are financially successful. And I can tell you right now, I've said it before, I didn't start this podcast to become a millionaire or even for it to replace a job, because I am still looking for a job. I've been out of work now since October of 2024. And so I started this podcast to be able to speak for myself, to be able to reclaim some of my history and to share my journey specifically in Hollywood, Los Angeles, as I worked my way up from assistant work at the Hollywood Reporter to finally becoming a studio executive 22 years later. Okay, so when I started this podcast, like I said, I thought I'll just be happy if it's just 10 or 11 people. We'll have our little community. And it exploded, like in a good way. It like, I don't promote this. I don't have audiograms. People offer it to me all the time. If you're listening and you're writing me on LinkedIn, like, why doesn't he ever let me do an audiogram? It's just because I've been wanting this podcast to be found organically. And so there's nothing wrong with people who use audiograms and that kind of thing, but it's not necessarily a viral podcast. It's an audio memoir. And, you know, I've always liked that people could find it organically. And that doesn't mean that I wouldn't promote it at some time, or if I had the funds to do it, that I would come up with a way. But in the meantime, I always want this podcast to be free because I listen to podcasts. And with the exception of Mark Maron, I have not paid to listen to podcasts. Now, I've donated to podcasts, and so I figured that's the perfect model. You know, it's always free. The archive is free. Right now, I've got 43 episodes. This is episode number 44. So I will just remind you guys, and it's a pleasant reminder. It's not nagging. If you go into my show notes, or if you go to www.letstalkabouthollywood.com/support, or if you just look in the show notes, or you go to my website, www.letstalkabouthollywood.com, there is a way to donate to the podcast if you like, and any amount is fine. No amount is too small. It takes currency in over 86 countries. It's safe. And if you do, I'll thank you here on the podcast. If you don't want to be thanked, I won't, and I'll respect your privacy. But just letting you know, it is there, and it's extremely meaningful. Again, I started this podcast as I've always said, it's not a telethon, but if you can contribute, it would mean a lot. Okay, so that's out of the way. Not nagging you guys. As always, I'm glad that you're here. So I hadn't planned to take 4 weeks off, but as you guys have noticed, if you've been listening to the podcast, usually at the end of the podcast, I say, see you next time. I used to say, see you next week, but then as I've done more and more episodes, I figure I can tell by the analytics, there's like 13 or 14 people who listen to every single one in order. And all of you who have listened to this in order, and this is your 44th episode, again, you can't see me, but my hands are together in a salute, and I am leaning forward saying thank you, because I absolutely appreciate it. And for those of you who don't listen to it in order, I understand, because I'm that person. You know, a lot of times, especially if someone's got years of a podcast, right, I'll just go by the topic, and each episode here has a synopsis. You can find it on my website or wherever you get your podcast. You can just look at the metadata, you can just look at what it's about, or you can see it on the iTunes Apple Store. You can see what the episode is about. So I know that a lot of people here cherry pick the episodes that they want to listen to, and that's fine as well. I guess I just, I hadn't planned on taking a month off, but I thought, well, I haven't even been out for 40 weeks. I've got 43 episodes up there. And so you just have to, it's not being lazy. You just have to hope that people find it and that people stay with it. And I hope you all know that I really wouldn't abandon this podcast. I just wouldn't do that. And I do have to tell you, however, I did have kind of a crisis about this podcast. I'll just take you a little bit behind the scenes of it. So when I started this podcast, again, I knew that I was going to be using a lot of archival material. And of course, I have banker's boxes full of it, journals, mementos from my career, notes, all kinds of things. And when I moved from LA here to Florida, to the Tampa area, I had shipped a lot of that stuff to myself. I gave away, I'd say 75% of my belongings in Los Angeles. I did not sell them. I gave it away. I didn't want it to be transactional. I wanted it to have a life, beyond just being my possession, right? So artwork, everything. And first edition books, all kinds of stuff. So the things that I did send ahead here to myself in Florida were really important, right? Because I figured I didn't want to have a moving truck show up like 2 years from now and just all of Hollywood come spilling out of it, right? Because I wanted to have a fresh start. Even though I'm staying in my entertainment career, right? I just thought, I've been in LA for 29 years. I can move somewhere else. And again, open up my life to other things, to love, to new experiences, things like that. Because, as you know, if you're in the industry, and if you're not, that's cool. I got your back. You've got a safe guided tour here. But if you are in the industry, then if you live in Los Angeles or if you live in New York or if you're overseas, if you work in Bollywood, like no matter if you are in the UK and that's what you do, then you know that unless you really, really make an effort to keep your life open, work can really, really be your main thing. And it's been my main thing, and I just feel like a career is great, and I love my audiences. And so that's what I do it for. But I just wanted to expand things for myself. And so I say all this to say that in the process of shipping these things to myself, I did use one storage unit. And in that storage unit, I had 5 boxes. And when I first got here in the winter, I believe it was February, I got T-boned in a parking lot here. Everything was fine, no police called. I wasn't at fault. The driver wasn't at fault. But I ended up getting sciatica from it, like pretty intensely. I think I told you all, like that's some Holy Ghost, like woo-wee. It was rough, like hard to sit down, hard to stand, all that. So I know that I did not move these boxes, some of these boxes. Well, I went to the storage unit and 3 of those boxes are gone. And so who knows what happened to them, but what was in those boxes were a lot of my mementos of me and Bebbles, my late first and only husband, just years worth of stuff that was important to me that's gone. And no one would really have any reason to steal it, of course, but something happened. And I wouldn't know what that something was because I wasn't going to the storage unit because I had sciatica, and what would I look like lifting a box? Like, please, that just wouldn't have been happening. And so when that happened, all I could think was, I don't know, not to put myself in the position of Steven Spielberg, but if I can give you a metaphor, if you're a Jaws fan, holla. All right. If you're a Jaws fan, just imagine that mechanical shark, like the first time their first shark sunk to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean and it's ruined. And you just think, how am I going to make this movie? That's what I'm assuming they thought. Of course, that's what they always say now in hindsight in the documentaries and the anniversary celebrations of Jaws. Well, this podcast isn't Jaws, but all I thought was, that's so much material that is gone. And that's somewhat what the podcast is based on, because of course there are contemporary episodes that I do where I'm talking about things that are happening like right now in the industry or in life, right? But then there are some that are really moments in time, and that's a lot of it. And so I have to say, at first I really thought like should I just end this podcast? Like, should I just finish season 2, which covers the year 2002, and then just be done with it? Or should I refashion the podcast into something else? But I really, really, really wrestled with it. And that's not why I've been gone for 4 months. I think it's just been one, job hunting, because it's very crucial. I don't have an income. So that's very important to anyone, as we know. And so a lot of times I just, 1 week I was cramming for this interview, this huge interview that I had, and I didn't get it, but it went well. I mean, I got good feedback, and that was great. That was through an agency. And, but otherwise I just thought, man, this is going to be so hard. And it already, isn't hard doing the podcast, but when you're doing memoir and when you're going back in time, like there's times I dream of Bevels, not bad dreams, but just where he's there and he's 38 years old and he looks incredible, and I can kiss him and it's super realistic and we're doing things. And then I say, I'll be right back. Or I go to run a shower, or I go to, put something down and in the living room, and then I come back and he's gone. And I understand that, right, in dreams, because they have to leave. Otherwise, if you're dreaming about someone who's deceased, of course you're not trying to follow them. And so I think sometimes with those visitation dreams, it's just protection. And so I just thought, sorry for that sigh, you guys, if you're listening on headphones. I should probably go back and take it out, but I'll leave it in because it's real. I'll just say it really just made me think, like, this is going to be hard. And it already is kind of hard, just putting things in historical perspective. That's why I always do a recap, so you guys can know how I feel now, or if I've, been talking shit, in my journals at the time. A 32, 33-year-old is just pissed, or, righteously angry, perhaps, at the time. And, and then I thought about it, and, I lived it. So, of course, I can do this series, and it's not like everything was gone. Like I said, it's just select years that were in those particular boxes are gone. But, I'm someone who's very analog too. So I've got paper copies. I've got copies here. I've got tapes. I've got audio tapes. I've got folders and bankers boxes of, so I'll get it together. I'm still going to be able to do this podcast. I think I just felt defeated in that moment. Like, first of all, 3 boxes of my stuff, irreplaceable stuff, is gone. A lot of it is what I was going to use over the duration of this podcast, which will keep going because it's about my career and it's 2026. And so even though I'm not working, and there have been years before, all totaled, where I wasn't working, you're still in the industry. You still have thoughts. You're still reaching out. You're still, putting yourself out there. So I'm just going to have to do it a different way. And so the podcast isn't going to change. I would just say, if anything, the podcast will be even richer. So when we're going back to 2002, or, which we're in right, in this current season that's out, season 2, as we go to 2003, 2004, on and on. I think it won't just be, what I was, talking about in the journals. It'll also be just kind of like a time capsule of that time, like what was going on, and it'll be fun. So, I mean, like I said, I think it'll just be a little more detailed, but also still very, very personal and still very vulnerable and still very authentic, because I know that that's why a lot of you listen. And I will continue to do that. So I don't want you to worry about it. The podcast isn't ending, but I have to say, for a couple of weeks, I just felt defeated. Like, honestly, it's like, one, I was working at a studio when I got laid off at Disney. And if you know me or if you follow the podcast, I was working on Marvel shows, Star Wars shows, and helping contribute to Disney doing well. And every studio I've always worked for, and I've worked for Warner Brothers, I've worked for Netflix, which doesn't consider itself a studio, Tubi. I've worked for these companies, and I've always been a good employee, and I've always been a good manager, and I've always made sure that everybody made plenty of money. And so being out of work, starting my podcast, moving, giving things away, which again was the right thing to do. I just, losing those boxes, it just was like, okay, this is a lot of loss. And, I guess, again, I'm just being open and honest with you all. Speaking for myself, loss is a big thing, because there's been a lot of loss that I feel that I've experienced. And I know that so many of us experience loss. So this isn't, trust me, it's not a contest. I know it's all relative. And I usually keep a lot of this to myself, except, I do, thank God, I can confide in my sister. I can confide in my mom. But like before I left Los Angeles last summer, I got followed by an ICE van, and they didn't stop me, but they followed me for blocks, walking home in the Hollywood foothills. Okay. Like not even half a mile from Griffith Park. If you know what that is, it's where the Griffith Park Observatory is. It's in Los Feliz, above Hollywood, and I cannot tell you what that was like. I mean, it was, first of all, it was 9:30 at night. It was dark. I had my hair was in a ponytail, and I had on, I guess, what looks like a bowling shirt. Very 2.5 Men, Charlie Sheen, even though that wasn't the look that I was going for. It's a black and it was a blue and white block pattern shirt with like music notes, where normally like a name tag would be. So it was cool, right? And I had on shorts, and I never used to go out with my cell phone, not for little local errands. I was just running up the street, up Hillhurst Avenue, and on my way home, this van started following me, and it was, that typical van, it's no license plate, windows blacked out, and just creeping, like going, like as I'm walking, it's literally driving along with me. And I just knew that whoever it was who was driving was debating, like, should we just snatch him or what? And I remember stopping because there was this one house that I was about to walk past that has a lava rock wall. Like, that's the way that they built their wall for their garden. And it's literally made out of lava, which is rough. And, you always see on TV, it's always 3 dudes hopping on somebody. And I'm like, I ain't getting hopped on and like my face skids across this lava rock or some shit. Like, So anyway, I just thought, I'm not running home. I'm in my neighborhood. I have no reason to run. My dad worked on Capitol Hill. My dad worked for the Library of Congress. I'm from Washington, D.C. I just, my dad is from Nashville. And my dad died when I was 11. But if he were alive, he would be in his early 80s. Late 70s, early 80s. And I know that he dealt with Jim Crow, and I just could not wrap my head around the fact that here I was under this beautiful moon in this beautiful neighborhood, and it may as well have been 1940 or 1830, and someone on a horse, like, show us your papers. And that's a neighborhood that I walked, with Bebbles. That's a neighborhood where, I hugged my sister, where I spent time with family or said goodbye to family, or I just, something in Los Angeles after that was just never the same. Just never the same. Again, they just drove off, but it was the fact that it could have happened. And we know that it's happened since, and we know that there are people who've been hurt. There are people who've been killed. We've seen it. And that, I can't say it's a loss of innocence, because I'm a man in my 50s. Like, hello, I know what racism is like. I've been called the N-word hundreds of times. But that was loss. That was loss. And, momentarily losing your career, even though, an entire town knows what we all know how to do, because it's not just me, right? It's like, it's a terrible job market, and Hollywood really doesn't have a lot to show for itself now. Like, yeah, sure, they want to make all these deals and they want to do all these mergers, but at the same time, they're making these little backroom promises, like there's not going to be any diversity, and which, again, Hollywood's never really been diverse. So it's a non-starter. How about you just hire people that know what they're doing? But basically with like a hiring freeze, hardly anyone's getting hired, and people aren't referring you because of course they have to hold on to their own job, so there was kind of that loss of just kind of like, Hollywood really is right now tripping, like Hollywood really is momentarily in some circles fucked up, like where you get laid off for doing well, which doesn't make sense. And it's very costly, to anyone, whether you work in the industry or not. And especially when that's really all you've really done for decades. And then there was, the loss of leaving there. And before I left, I kept I did keep some of Bebel's ashes, enough that, I could keep with me and, share, like, as far as in those decorative little urns, that you can have like almost like an amulet or something. But I scattered Bebels and his late mother together ethically before I left, because Bebels was from California and they had lived there for decades. And so even though I was leaving, I felt that they should be together there, as far as their ashes. And also, which I haven't gotten into, and I will at some point, but I had also lost a partner a few years ago. And so coming here to Florida and starting over, was never going to be super easy, but I really always give it my all. I loved resuming this podcast. I took a month-long hiatus. You all waited for me. I don't want to do podcast episodes if I have to fake the funk, which is why I just will let a week pass instead of phone it in. And so I think by the time those boxes disappeared, not like it's a mystery. Like, I don't need like amateur sleuths to try to figure it out. It's just like who knows? You know what I mean? I think it just all kind of, and then not having an income, it was just kind of like, this is a lot, and I just need to process this kind of loss. and what it all means. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 4 weeks. Okay. But I am back. I never really left, and I'm not going to leave you guys, and you guys haven't left me. And so thank you. And that's really what I recorded this episode to say to you all. And I know that it's long, it's a half an hour, so I'll wrap this up. I just want you to know that I always appreciate you. You know, this podcast isn't going anywhere. I just needed to catch up with myself a little because it is an adjustment. There's a lot of adjustments, you know, and I used to live here in Florida when I was a preteen and some of my teenage years. I went through 7th, 8th, some of 9th grade, and half of 11th grade here in Florida. Countryside High School, Dunedin High School, Dunedin Middle, and, you know, I'm back. And things are going to work out. I know it. I have faith. I always have faith. And I prefer to be funnier. I'm better when I'm funnier, I think. But I also think, you know, there is such a thing as grief in silence. And I know that we do that sometimes respectively to protect ourselves, or protect others, or keep the peace. But thank you all for letting me record this episode and just kind of share some of my grief, you know, that I have been feeling. And I'm always open to what you're feeling. And you can always reach out to me at studioexeccarl@gmail.com. So that's studioexeckarl@gmail.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. So, you know, if you looked at the cover art, you won't be able to miss me if you look up my name and see me. But you can write me directly. I'd love to know what you guys think. I'd love to know what's on your mind. I'd love to know what you want to hear more of. And the podcast will be back. We'll be back to the journals next week. And you know, that format is, you know, I'll give you modern day greetings. We'll get into the journals, and then we'll do a recap. And the recap always comes back to 2026 or whatever the year is. You know, last year it was 2025, this year 2026. I just think it's going to become an even better podcast. And thank you all for growing with me, for knowing that this was really my first year, even though this is season 2. I've been doing this about 10 months, and I know it's lo-fi realness sometimes, and you always stick with me, and I appreciate all of your support. So thank you again. I will see you next time, and it won't be 4 weeks from now. That I can promise you. And again, not nagging, when there have been donations to the podcast, I usually try to do more, just because I appreciate your support. Now, I'm going to do it regardless. So again, that's not me being conditional. I'm just saying, I really will always make time for this podcast. And thank you for making time for me. As I always say, without you, there's no me on this microphone recording this, you know? So thank you. And until next time, as always, remember, love is real. Love is real. And I wish you all great things. I truly do. Sending you love. Stay safe. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.